Surya floated in the air and looked down at the ground with a complicated gaze. The 73rd demon realm was surrounded by a bright light, as sentences were woven into one being. It was the sight of the world choosing its master before the enormous destruction flying from the universe. Surya muttered, "It's only the 25th scenario, yet a giant story has been obtained. There is such a thing in the star stream?" Surya had lived for a long time, but he couldn't come up with a name. There was Hercules of Olympus, but he was a half-god, not a pure human. King Oedipus exclaimed, "Surya, it's fine. It's still germinating, and you can crush it." The giant story was unlike any story. It was the sum total of numerous tales, and a story that guaranteed a tremendous probability by itself. However, it might be a giant story, but it was only beginning. The Demon King of Salvation was just a superficial being who fortunately rose to the status of a constellation. Nevertheless, why couldn't Surya easily feel confident? "Surya, what's wrong with you? Let's finish it." All giant stories were the beginning of the end. The story that headed towards the end of the epic scenario. Even so, getting a giant story didn't mean that everyone would get the qualification of the end. Some giant stories were connected with Ham, but others didn't go near the vicinity of Ham without disappearing. "Surya, it's because you can't get the qualification of the end." He didn't forget Asmodeus' words. In his tranquil rage, a message entered Surya's ears. "A new scenario has been given to you. You will be the destruction of the 73rd demon realm." Surya frowned at the undesirable role assignment. "The star stream. What do you want from this old body?" He lost one of his 12 sons to Chokjong-yong and wasted a great deal of energy against Asmodeus. In addition, he had exhausted most of the probability given to him. "Surya, you didn't have to go by the book. I have an idea. There is a way to subdue them without fighting." Surya frowned. "Oedipus, are you going to use a despicable trick again? Against humans?" That isn't it. I am the supreme god of light, Surya." The great sentences of Vedas were shining in Surya's halo. "Even if I can't use my full strength, I will never lose to humans." Oedipus shut his mouth in front of the overwhelming status. Surya raised his hand and the paused carriage started the violent charge again. The locomotive made a deafening sound as it crashed through the atmosphere. Red and blue flames sparked from the head. The first one to speak was Eugene Kyak. "It doesn't seem like 135,000 kilometers. If a train of that size really appeared, it would seem like a giant planet was falling. Chokjong-yong told me. His words are correct. It is around 30 kilometers long. Still, that is enough to destroy this place. Demon King of Salvation, what happened to the giant story?" "It has just started talking. The sentences are slow to gather. The giant story of the 73rd demon realm was safely obtained, but things weren't over just by receiving it. It needs more time to work properly. We have to slow down the train." Perhaps this train was all that the present Surya could mobilize. There was a chance for us if we managed to block that train. I looked back and saw Chokjong-yong already prepared to jump forward. "Please, Goryo's first sword. Believe in me." Chokjong-yong shot forward towards the sky. Eugene Kyak and I chased after him, and the rest of the group followed on Shin Yusung's chimera dragon. The thunder-eating bird and mysterious bird of the Nile flew to interfere with us, but the brash swamp predator bit at their wings. "Leave these guys to me." The closer we got to the head of the train, the more I realized the enormous scale of Vedas. The width of the head of the train was a few 100 meters, and it was at the level of an outer god. "Ha!" Chokjong-yong shouted and showed his 3-sword style. 3-sword style, 2-sword mountain chop. Chokjong-yong's slash that cut through the mountain hit the train. The head of the train met Chokjong-yong's status and let out a strange sound. It deviated from its course, but the speed of the train didn't slow. In the formidable heat, it was Chokjong-yong's sword slash that was melted away. However, Chokjong-yong didn't stop. 3-sword style, 3-sword ocean chop. A strike that cut the sea. It felt like there was a tsunami, and the speed of the train was reduced a slight degree. The biggest achievement was the explosion to the lead car, creating an internal access point. "It will be easier to move inside. I will slow it down from outside." Chuk Jong-yong emitted a strong magic power from the head of the train. Still, it was hard for Chuk Jong-yong to deal with an object of this speed alone. "I'll help you, Ajashi." Shin Yu-sung's Chimera Dragon moved to the head of the train with Chuk Jong-yong. The second-grade monster, the Chimera Dragon, created intense wind pressure, and the speed of the train was further reduced. Chuk Jong-yong cried out, "I have somehow bought 20 minutes. Surya will be in the car at the end. Knock him down, and this story will disappear. Go!" We nodded and entered the interior of the train. The train looked like a subway built for a giant. We adapted to the inertia to a certain extent and pressed the button to go to the next compartment of the train. The door won't open. This train is only available to the constellations of Vedas. Yu Jun-hyuk didn't hesitate to activate the Breaking the Sky swordsmanship and hit the door. There was a dent in the door, but it didn't open. Amazing. Unlike Chuk Jong-yong's expectations, the train's internal strength was formidable. It wouldn't be hard to break if Yu Jun-hyuk and I were in good shape, but the train was 30 kilometers long. In other words, we had to consider the distribution of power. Then the first sentence of the giant story was heard. The story started on the subway. Sparks surged, and my stories were released into the air. I felt waves surging from a distant place. It was the sign of a very old story. I looked back, and the party members seemed to be feeling something familiar. "The first story of your giant story has begun." Yu Jun-hyuk, Lee Hyung-sung, and Yu Sung-ah looked at me. The sparks that flowed like the tide was transforming the scenery around us. Lee Hyung-sung murmured with astonishment, This! Every giant story was a different story. Some involved the birth of a hero, while others told the birth of a world. Our story wasn't a hero's biography or a creation story. This story was our survival record. The number 3807 was on the back door of the train. I looked around inside. It's the subway. All stories invoked stage transformation when the place or person involved in the story collided. The 3807 car of the 3434 Bolgwang train. It was where Yu Sung-ah and Lee Hyung-sung became my colleagues and where I met Yu Jun-hyuk. All of our stories started here. Lee Hyung-sung's fists were clenched as he opened his mouth with a tense expression. I remember that time. It isn't a good memory, but Yu Sung-ah was watching me with a faint smile. Even so, I often think about it. It wasn't a memory I could happily recall. Someone's death and the hell of an absurd scenario. It wasn't a memory I could feel nostalgic about, but it was a history that we survived. Lee Hyung-sung smiled and placed his hand on the door. I think I can do it somehow. There was a soldier who wanted to be righteous. Eventually, everything became a story. It was hard, sad, and even something I wanted to forget. After all, everything was a story. I didn't expect it would be comforting for us now. There was only one thing we could know. The constellation prisoner of the Golden Headband is watching your party. The constellation secretive plotter is listening to your story. In a world where sadness and joy were useless, we had to continue the story. The door, which didn't open to Yu Jun-hyuk's Breaking the Sky swordsmanship, started to open at Lee Hyung-sung's power. The giant story dwelling in Lee Hyung-sung's body started exerting its strength. The character Lee Hyung-sung has used the stigma Great Mountain Push Level 10. When I thought about it, Lee Hyung-sung was the one who opened the door to escape. Go! Quickly! Lee Hyung-sung opened the gap and our party ran. Nevertheless, it was only one door and the train was still long. This time it was Yu Jun-hyuk who came forward. I will break through next. I suddenly remembered a long time ago. The regressor who annihilated the other incarnations on the train and rushed forward like a tank was now in front of me. There was the strongest and loneliest man in the world. Yu Jun-hyuk put away his sword and concentrated all his magic power on his fist. There he slammed his bare fist into the door. The door of the car, which was unharmed by the sword, was torn apart by his bare hands. This was the effect of stage transformation. It was unfortunate for Surya that his main story was this train. Dokshashi! I don't think we need to break this car. Yu Sung-ah figured something out and yelled. Just like when I found the opening device, Yu Sung-ah found a way to open the car door without force. There was also a woman who hid herself for others. One car, another car. We kept moving forward. It was as if we were living history again. There was the sound of hammering from the outside of the train. Lee Ji-hee was also struggling to reduce the speed of the train. The sword demon wounded after losing a relationship was met. The Chimera's dragon roar was heard. In my arms, Biyu raised her head and looked at the head of the train. To be exact, it was in Shin Yu-sung's direction. A child born in the gap between past and future wept. The next moment, the Chimera Dragon let out a formidable roar. The train tilted and the speed of the train was further reduced. I didn't know, but I thought Biyu might have given something to Shin Yu-sung here. We aren't halfway yet. We have to hurry. As Yu Jung-hyuk stated, we were still far away from the end of the train. More than 10 minutes had already passed. The speed might be reduced, but the industrial complex would be completely destroyed at this pace. To make matters worse, we reached a challenge when we reached the next car. A ray of light shot towards us. Lee Hyung-sung blocked it for me and held his shoulder. You can't go any further. Founder of humanity Manu and several other constellations were waiting there. Yu Jung-hyuk directly used Breaking the Sky swordsmanship against them, but it wasn't enough to break through the constellations on the defense. They knew they had to drag out time here. I was going to use the magic power I had saved when the ceiling of the train started to be squeezed. Something was destroying the train with an immense amount of magic power from outside. What's going on? It was at least a narrative-grade constellation. They couldn't destroy the shell of the train unless they had power to match Chok Jong-yong. Move! Then Jang Hae-young's voice was heard outside the train. Kim Dokja! They came! They came! In the next moment, the entire ceiling was torn off and two beings appeared with Jang Hae-young. The constellation of a small planet is looking at you. It was a small person, filled with a brilliant blue-white energy, and a huge woman releasing a blue aura. Funnily enough, my vision seemed to blur for a moment. Where is my disciple? There was the strongest small person in the world as a teacher. It seems that we're a bit late. The world of the strongest giant was saved. They were existences with enough power as Chok Jong-yong who could help us. Transcendent! In front of Manu, the two transcendents of First Miram descended. The Breaking the Sky Sword Saint Namgong Minyong, the Paradox Bakchong Kyrgios Rodgrame. Namgong Minyong glanced at us and said, Do it properly until the end. Otherwise, I'll kick your ass. Kyrgios stared at me and declared, You will pay the price for lying to me. I won't allow your death until then. Kyrgios and the Breaking the Sky Sword Saint fired their skills at the door to the next car. The energy of the Breaking the Sky swordsmanship and electrification combined and caused a formidable wind pressure to rise. The constellation shrank back at their momentum. The fearsome waves of magic power advanced and crushed the doors blocking their way. It was a straight road prepared for a short period of time. Yu Jung-hyuk met my gaze and we started running. The exclusive skill Way of the Wind level 11 plus 1 is activated. Way of the Wind and Red Phoenix Shompo assisted each other as we ran. We soon reached the last car of the train. Finally, there was a man who knew the ending of all these worlds. This story didn't exist in Ways of Survival. It was a story that never existed before. It was a story that would lead me to the ending I wanted. I opened the last door of the train.